Have you ever wondered why you work so hard? No, seriously, stop for a moment and think. Why do you drag yourself out of bed every morning and dedicate most of your waking hours doing something that, most of the time, you'd rather not be doing? To make money, you answer almost automatically. But why do you need money? To survive. Exactly. In the system we live in, you need to sell your time, your energy, your body, and your mind, in short, your life, just to continue existing. Karl Marx would call this alienation. You're not working because you want to create something meaningful. You're working because if you don't, you'll starve. And that's not freedom. It's coercion disguised as choice. Welcome to capitalism, the system that transformed the human need to work for survival into a complex structure of exploitation that seems as natural as the air we breathe. So natural that you've probably never questioned its legitimacy. Capitalism isn't just an economic system. It's a lens through which we see the world. It's the water we swim in without realizing we're wet. And Karl Marx, perhaps the most incisive critic of this system, spent his life trying to show us this water. In Capital and the Communist Manifesto, Marx wasn't just writing books about economics or politics. He was dissecting the anatomy of a system that shapes not only how we produce things, but how we think, how we relate to each other, and how we understand ourselves. A system that, according to him, inevitably alienates us from the product of our labor, from ourselves, and from other human beings. I'm going to take you on a journey through Marx's fundamental concepts without you having to read 500 dense pages. And believe me, this journey might change how you see the world around you. It might change how you see your work, your money, your relationships, and even your dreams and aspirations. By the end of this video, you'll have the tools to see the hidden gears of capitalism, those invisible structures that determine how you live your life day after day. And perhaps, just perhaps, you'll begin to question whether this is really the only possible way to organize our collective existence. If you're ready to have your worldview challenged, subscribe to the channel now and keep watching. Because, as Marx would suggest, the first step to changing the world is understanding it. And to understand it, we need to look beyond appearances, beyond what we've been taught to accept as natural and inevitable. We need to see what's hidden in plain sight. This is your red pill. Are you ready to see how deep the rabbit hole goes? You've been told a story since childhood. It goes something like this. If you work hard enough, you'll succeed. If you don't succeed, you simply didn't work hard enough. Capitalism is fair. It rewards merit, innovation, and effort. Everyone has an equal opportunity to climb the ladder. The market is a perfect, rational mechanism that efficiently allocates resources to their best use. The wealthy deserve their wealth because they've earned it through superior skill or effort. This is the bedtime story of capitalism, the lullaby that keeps the masses peaceful while their labor power is extracted for profit. Marx saw through this facade. In Capital, he meticulously demonstrated how capitalism isn't about equal opportunity or fair rewards. It's about exploitation. The fundamental relationship in capitalism isn't between equals freely exchanging goods and services. It's between those who own the means of production, factories, land, technology, capital, and those who own nothing but their ability to work. When you sell your labor power for a wage, your employer isn't paying you the full value of what you produce. If they did, they wouldn't make a profit. This difference between what you produce and what you're paid, Marx called surplus value. It's the source of all profit, all interest, all rent, and it's fundamentally exploitative. But I signed my contract willingly, you might protest. Did you? Did you have a real choice? When the alternative is starvation, homelessness, or destitution, is that really a free choice? As Marx would say, workers are free in a double sense. free to sell their labor to any capitalist who will buy it, and free from owning any means of production themselves. This isn't freedom, it's a sophisticated form of coercion. Look around at the world capitalism has built. 8 men own as much wealth as the poorest half of humanity. While some work multiple jobs just to afford rent, others inherit more wealth than they could spend in 100 lifetimes. Is this efficient allocation? Is this the reward of merit? The myth persists because it serves those in power. Capitalism needs you to believe that poor people deserve poverty and rich people deserve wealth. It needs you to blame yourself, not the system, when you can't afford healthcare or education. It needs you to see your exploitation as a personal failing, not a structural inevitability. Even the language we use hides this reality. We call workers human resources, as if people were just another raw material to be consumed in production. We talk about job creators instead of profit extractors. We celebrate billionaires as geniuses rather than seeing them as beneficiaries of a system designed to concentrate wealth. Marx wasn't just an economist or philosopher. He was trying to wake us from this collective hallucination, to show us that what we accept as natural, inevitable, and fair is actually a human-made system designed to benefit the few at the expense of the many. A system that masquerades as freedom while stealing the fruits of your labor. You wake up to an alarm you didn't set, you commute to a workplace you didn't choose, you perform tasks you didn't design, you create value you'll never receive. You're exhausted at the end of the day, with just enough energy to consume products you had no hand in creating, before sleeping briefly and repeating the cycle tomorrow. This is your cage, not made of steel or concrete, but of economic necessity, social convention, and the illusion of choice. Marx called this condition alienation, the profound disconnection between human beings and their natural creative capacity, their labor, their products, and ultimately themselves. Consider your smartphone. Someone mined the rare earth metals. Inside it, someone else assembled it in a factory. Programmers coded its software, designers crafted its look, yet none of these workers own what they've created. Their labor, their creativity, their very life energy has been transformed into a commodity that belongs to someone else. And you, disconnected from this production process, only interact with the final product as a consumer. This alienation pervades every aspect of life under capitalism. We're alienated from our labor when we have no control over what we produce or how we produce it. We're alienated from the product of our labor when it becomes someone else's property. We're alienated from each other when market relations replace human ones. And ultimately, we're alienated from our species being, Marx's term for our essential nature as creative, social beings who find fulfillment in productive activity. The tragedy is that most of us don't even feel the bars of this cage. We've been born into it, raised in it. Its constraints feel natural, inevitable. Like fish unaware of water, we swim in capitalism without recognizing its presence or its effects on us. Even our dreams and aspirations are colonized by capitalist ideology. We dream not of meaningful creation or genuine human connection, but of consumption. Bigger houses, newer cars, exotic vacations. Our imaginations are limited by what can be bought and sold. Look at how we measure success. By wealth, by possessions, by position in the hierarchy. Not by contribution to human flourishing, not by depth of relationships, not by authentic self-expression. The values of the market have become our values. And what of our time, that irreplaceable resource, the very substance of our lives? In the developed world, the average person will spend 90,000 hours at work over their lifetime. For what? To create wealth they'll never see, to enrich owners they'll never meet. Marx saw this invisible prison clearly. In the economic and philosophical manuscripts of 1844, he wrote that under capitalism, labor does not belong to his essential being. In his work, therefore, he does not affirm himself but denies himself, does not feel content but unhappy, does not develop freely his physical and mental energy but mortifies his body and ruins his mind. This is the invisible architecture of capitalism. Not just economic arrangements, but a comprehensive system that shapes consciousness itself, that makes the unnatural appear natural, that presents historical arrangements as eternal truths. Marx didn't just criticize capitalism, he revealed its inner mechanics. He peeled back its skin to show us the skeleton and organs underneath, how they function together, and why they inevitably produce crisis, inequality, and alienation. At the heart of Marx's analysis is a revolutionary insight. Capitalism isn't just an economic system, but a social relation. It's not static, but dynamic, not natural, but historical. It had a beginning, and therefore it will have an end. In Capital, Marx introduced the concept of the commodity, objects produced not for direct use, but for exchange. Under capitalism, everything becomes a commodity, even human labor. When you sell your labor power for a wage, you're commodifying yourself, turning yourself into something that can be bought and sold. This commodification leads to what Marx called fetishism, not in the sexual sense, but in the sense of attributing magical powers to objects. We forget that economic relations are actually relations between people and start treating them as relations between things. Money, markets, prices, all these appear to have powers of their own when they're really just expressions of human. Social relationships take money. It seems to have inherent value, but it doesn't. Its value comes entirely from social agreement, from the human relations it represents. Yet we treat it as if it had power in itself. We sacrifice our time, our health, our relationships at the altar of money, forgetting that we created it, not the other way around. Marx also discovered the inherent contradictions in capitalism, tensions that can't be resolved within the system itself. The drive for profit leads capitalists to replace workers with machines, but this eventually reduces the profit rate because only living labor creates new value. Capitalists need workers both as laborers and as consumers, but they constantly drive down wages to increase profits, undermining workers' ability to consume. These contradictions lead to recurring crises, like the Great Depression or the 2008 financial collapse. Each crisis is temporarily resolved by destroying excess capital or finding new markets, but the underlying contradictions remain. It's like treating symptoms without curing the disease. Perhaps most profoundly, Marx recognized that capitalism transforms everything, including human beings, into instruments. People become means to ends, not ends in themselves. Your worth is measured by your productive capacity or purchasing power, not your humanity. In the German ideology, Marx wrote, "In communist society, society regulates the general production, and thus makes it possible for me to do one thing today and another tomorrow, to hunt in the morning, fish in the afternoon, rear cattle in the evening, criticize after dinner, just as I have a mind, without ever becoming hunter, fisherman, herdsman, or critic." This vision illuminates what capitalism steals from us, the possibility of whole, integrated lives where work is an expression of our humanity, not its denial. Marx wasn't just documenting economic arrangements, he was fighting for human liberation. From a system that turns people into cogs in a machine they neither control nor benefit from. There's a moment when you truly grasp Marx's analysis, not intellectually, but viscerally. When the system you've taken for granted suddenly appears strange, when the familiar becomes foreign. This is the crisis of consciousness Marx aimed to provoke. You realize you've been playing a role in a script you didn't write. You've been the worker, the consumer, the debtor, stepping into these roles without questioning why they exist or who benefits from them. Your identity has been shaped by forces you never chose to acknowledge. Think about how you introduce yourself to strangers. "What do you do?" they ask, and you respond with your job title, not your passions, your values, your relationships, your market position. Your role in the production process has become your identity. Or consider how you measure your worth. By salary, position, possessions. These are all external valuations imposed by the market, not expressions of your inherent humanity. Marx would say capitalism has trained you to see yourself through its lens, as a commodity with a certain market value, not as a human being, with inherent dignity. The spectator's crisis comes when you recognize that what you've been calling freedom is actually a carefully circumscribed set of choices within a system that remains unchallenged. You can choose your employer, but not whether to have one. You can choose your consumer goods, but not whether to be a consumer. You can choose your debt, but increasingly not whether to go into debt. In The Holy Family, Marx wrote, "History does nothing. It possesses no immense wealth. It wages no battles. It is man, real, living man, who does all that, who possesses and fights. History is not, as it were, a person apart, using man as a means to achieve its own aims. History is nothing but the activity of man pursuing his aims. This realization brings both vertigo and possibility. Vertigo because the foundations of your understanding have shifted. Possibility because if history is made by humans, it can be remade by humans. The crisis deepens when you recognize your own complicity. Every time you purchase something made with exploited labor, every time you invest for maximum return regardless of social cost, every time you climb the corporate ladder, by stepping on others, you reinforce the system Marx critiqued. But there's also a crisis for those who benefit most from capitalism. The capitalist is as alienated as the worker, though in a different way. Driven by competition to accumulate endlessly, treating even luxury not as enjoyment but as status display, the capitalist becomes a servant to capital itself. As Marx wrote, in the Grundrisse, money is therefore not only an object, but is the object of greed. It is essentially ori sacra fames, accursed hunger for gold. Greed as such as a particular form of the drive, i.e. as distinct from the craving for a particular kind of wealth, e.g. for clothes, weapons, jewels, women, wine, etc., is possible. Only when general wealth as such, has become individualized in a particular thing. Marx didn't analyze capitalism just to understand it. His famous line from Theses on Feuerbach says it all. Philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. So where does this leave you now that you've glimpsed capitalism through Marx's lens? Are you doomed to participate in a system you recognize as exploitative? Is there any escape from the invisible prison? Marx would say yes, but not individually. The liberation he envisioned was collective. Capitalism isn't maintained by any single person, and it can't be overcome by individual lifestyle choices. It requires what he called praxis, reflection combined with action, theory meeting practice. Begin by seeing clearly. Notice the ways capitalism shapes your thinking, your desires, your sense of self. Question what you've been taught about work, success, property, and freedom. Recognize alienation when you feel it, that sense of disconnection from your labor, from others, from yourself, then connect with others. Marx emphasized that capitalism divides us, pitting worker against, worker in competition. The antidote is solidarity, recognizing common interests across artificial divisions of race, gender, and nationality. The famous closing line of the Communist Manifesto still resonates. Workers of the world, unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains. Seek out spaces and relationships not defined by market logic. Create communities where people are valued for who they are, not what they produce or consume. Practice mutual aid instead of competition. These don't replace the need for structural change, but they prefigure an alternative and build the social bonds needed for collective action. Most importantly, reclaim your agency. Marx showed how capitalism makes human creations, markets, money, commodities, seem like natural forces beyond our control. But they're not. They're human constructions, and humans can construct differently. As Marx wrote in The 18th, Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please. They do not make it under self-selected circumstances, but under circumstances existing already, given and transmitted from the past. This insight contains both limitation and possibility. We're constrained by historical conditions, but within those constraints we still make history. We can still act. We can still change course. If this video has sparked something in you, a question, an insight, a recognition, don't let it fade. Share these ideas, talk about them, test them against your experience. The most revolutionary act in a system that individualizes and isolates is to create connection and shared understanding. Subscribe to this channel for more explorations of the thinkers who help us see beyond the horizon of the present moment. Like this video so others can find it, share it with someone who might be ready for their own moment of recognition, because ultimately, Marx's most enduring insight may be this: another world is possible. Not perfect, not utopian, but more just, more free, and more human than the world capitalism has made. And the first step toward that world is believing we can create it together.